Just like with food, we can ask ourselves, and in my Social 100 class, is anybody in here taking my Social 100 class? I guess I forget. Usually there's some overlapping. Yeah. So I ask, for the Big Food Project, what's your relationship with food? Well, I think that it's valuable or for us to, as human beings and sociologists, look at it and say, what's our relationship with water? And that's what we're going to do during this chapter. There's a lot of science to be looked at, and we will talk about that. And then, of course, a lot of politics when we talk about water and privatization and some really big issues. Again, we're talking about a unique, singular, and irreplaceable substance. So when we talk about anything else, it really doesn't compare to water. But to understand why, again, people are doing with water what they do, or if we're ignoring things in relationship to water, or we could do better, or try and protect our water more, that all boils down to that question that we could ask, which is, what is your relationship with water? So I did ask maybe what's a word that comes to mind, but I think maybe more importantly would be, what's our relationship to water? So I'm going to ask that question, and instead of typing it, if you want to unmute your mic, what's our relationship with water? What's your relationship with water? And I think that this can range from really deep philosophical things to some real basic things, but again, maybe we haven't asked ourselves that question as I'm drinking water. So what do you think? Because that's going to help us understand why we're doing what we're doing or not doing what we're doing, right? And of course, if I were to ask this question, and instead of everybody like is in Colorado or similar here, at least we're connected through that. If people were just from different countries, wow, wouldn't that be an awesome sociological thing? Because your access to water is so very different just from where you're at, who your government is, what your country looks like. So to me, that would be really cool. But all right, anyway, still a great question. What's your relationship with water?
I feel like in general, as humans, we take water for granted, especially in the developed world. We know that water is essential for life. Life can't be sustained without water. But because we have access to it so easily, it comes out of our taps and our showers, and we can fill up our water bottles on, wherever we go. And we can, buy bottled water anywhere now. We don't consider it as valuable as it is.
Yeah, good. Who else? I there's so many things that you just said there. The thing that stands out to me is that some people have to walk miles and miles for just a little bit of water every day, and they're not guaranteed. And I love those really cool fancy water bottle stations on campus where you just set your water bottle there and just magic. I'm into stuff like that. But when you stand there and when we're talking about global water situations, yeah, that's intense privilege just to be and I not only need something to fill my water, I need something magical and hands-free. Yeah, it's so good. That's why I love Soch. Good answer. Who else? Our relationship with water.
I think for me, at least, I know I kind of wrote about this in my discussion post, but growing up in Illinois, next to the Great Lakes, I feel in my mind, it was never I knew, of course, that there was lots of issues with water and droughts, but living next to the Great Lakes, it wasn't as important in my mind. Obviously I tried my best to conserve water where I could, but I feel it's a lot different from being out here where even I feel just people watering their lawns. I'm that seems like a waste because I know that there's water issues here. Well, at least watering lawns in Illinois doesn't seem as big of a deal.
Yeah, bear down. There you go. Yeah, but I agree with you because I never saw a sprinkler system when I was growing up in Illinois. It was just wet in Wisconsin. It was going to rain. People just didn't do that. I've been out here for 20 years, but even watering your lawn, it's so intense out here with water rides. And of course, we've been in a drought now out in Colorado. They were saying it was a 10-year drought, but it's just really, it's how it's changing. And of course, in California, they've been dealing with this for much longer than we have, because they have all sorts of gray water implemented and ways to do that. So to talk about gray water, a lot of people out here are like, what's gray water? Well, in California, I guarantee you people know, because they have to. So that's maybe, you know, a linchpin right there. If it's around you, if it's abundant. And now, of course, there's all sorts of water rights issues with the Great Lakes, and privatization and things like that, which I couldn't conceptualize, you know, before checking it out. Definitely able to have somewhat clean, safe water compared to Flint or New Mexico. Yeah, so absolutely, access. And obviously, just because, or not obviously, that must be my word of the day, but because some people geographically have so much access and some people have so little. I mean, if the water was found out to be the quality of Flint, Michigan and Fort Collins, Colorado, do you think something would be done about it? I mean, Flint, Michigan, they pretty much wrote that off. I mean, the federal government did anyway. As far as the community, they're still struggling. They're trying to improve the water, trying to do it any way they can. But this is a year ago now that the government was just like, sorry, you're on your own. So yeah, access is going to be dependent upon quality, even in this country, to things that we talk about all the time in sociology: gender, race, socioeconomic status, or SES, which I think would be a huge indicator, and is actually, like I may have mentioned that before, but it's socioeconomic status. And I guess if you're taking notes, you could write this down, is, you know, the single biggest health indicator. So as we look across the board with sociology, we know that race is huge, we know that gender is big, but socioeconomic status is the biggest, sort of relatable on all levels and impactful on all levels. So where are you getting water, and who are you? Do we value you? Where are you? And where do you live? Because of course, across the tracks is oftentimes across the tracks, and has the greater externalities in poor neighborhoods, lower socioeconomic class, of all sorts of environmental harm. And we'll look at that in regards to environmental justice too. I worry where I use water. Okay. Symbiosis, water is not just needed to survive, but literally part of us. Yeah. So what's your relationship with water? Somebody's like, you know, very symbiotic. Again, I haven't not had access to water, and I wouldn't, you know, there's all sorts of great sociological things that you could do experiments, but I don't know that that's a very safe one, you know, to keep yourself from water. But of course, it's a very, very short amount of time. So not only, and this is like where we start to be like, ooh, because what we have to look is, what's our relationship with it? If our relationship is so disconnected from it, but we still need it absolutely to live and survive, then we've got to have our knowledge of it, what we're doing to save it, how on top of people are. We've got to have that dialed in for our own survival, right? Obviously. So, oops, sorry, that down there, my dad's calling through. So yeah, a big important piece there is that we can't survive without it. That's why, you know, and this is over a decade ago when people were talking about collecting fresh water from icebergs and from ice flows. And I really was just like, it rubbed me the wrong way, because I'd rather prevent that melting in the first place. But the realistic thing would be that that's still all melting currently into the ocean, right? So, and we mentioned this before, but if you're going to be losing millions and millions of gallons of fresh water, you might want to get on that. Even if you have no solution for the ultimate, you know, problem that's causing it, or you haven't committed to that solution. So, all right, who else? What's your relationship with water? And then I'll look at a few of these questions, but they're not really quite as interesting as us thinking about what that might be.
So I'm actually from Southern California. So growing up, I remember in the summers, just remembering seeing so many brown lawns, because that's when the drought was pretty severe. So people weren't really allowed to water their lawns or do much with that. Just always growing up, like no rain. I'm sure you all have heard of the gender reveal fire in California. And that's pretty much where my town is, hometown. So used to a lot of dry mountains and hills and all that, but then again, I also remember growing up and going to the beach and swimming a lot. So I'd say like my relationship with water is close in a sense, like growing up being a swimmer and using it for recreation, but in terms of necessity, like going through the droughts, that's been interesting.
Right. Oh, is there anything worse than a gender reveal party? Probably. Just yes, of course, yes, there are things that are worse. I'm sorry. Is there anything worse than a gender reveal party that burns down millions of acres? Now we're getting there. Good Lord. We could get into that whole gender piece, which I do anyway, and just let people figure that out before you start burning the world down. But other news. So again, very close to water, recreation, swimming, a big part of your life, but lawns, at that point, not a thing, don't water. Again, it's funny because now I go back to Illinois, not funny, and of course sprinkler systems are everywhere because they can't rely on the water that they used to when I was a kid. Now in California, did you know that they're painting lawns? Have you seen this? Raise your hand if you've oh yeah. So go to Google and search up like lawn painting commercials. It's a riot. It's a riot. They show up and they literally just paint that whole sucker bright green and with the thing that they spray the house with. It's like, so I guess really we know that although I think that every green area is important, lawns, you're in the middle of so much cement where you're not going to get absorption anyway, and it's a lot of runoff, and so it's not very valuable. So hopefully, that's probably toxic paint. If it wasn't, I would be up for, of course, xeriscaping and things like that. So now people are getting into that because they do want some plants to survive, hopefully pollinators, things that don't need a lot of water, but that is a reality for folks. This is actually the only time that I've ever watered my lawn is since I've been out here at the farm, because we have a pond with a spring in it. And so it stays pretty full all year long, and so I have access to watering the trees, which is really important, and it's all fish water and stuff like that, so I use that for our garden as well. But yeah, I've never really done that till I had access, and now since it's kind of on our property, it's a good thing to have. Water rights though, and we will talk about that because we do have a canal running through our farm, but water rights are a big deal too, and purchasing water rights and trying to have access to that and what that looks like. Used to live in Australia. We didn't get much water either, hence huge fire. Yeah, because everything was so dry. Katie, would you be willing to talk about that experience? Because I know that's been the way that it's been for a while in Australia. And then, of course, this last year, much, much bigger.
Yeah, so the fires were really bad in Queensland, and a lot of kids also just started them by like throwing cigarettes into the forest, and everything just completely lit up because people were also not getting rid of all of the old like leaves and everything. Like they stopped getting rid of that for like regeneration of all the old seeds and stuff. And so because all of that old like leaves and trees and stuff that were all dead had been there for so long, that also let it all lit up really quickly, and like spreading all over Australia, because Australia is like on the east coast. It's all woods and forests and trees and bushes, and so it just spread really quickly because there's no water over there, and they had been in a drought for like over a year, and so when it all lit up, it just never stopped. It killed everything.
Terrifying because the biodiversity loss there, the numbers that are starting to come out, like I saw like projected stuff, and then now I've seen more in the last few months, and it's tragic, but very high percentages of like.
It was horrible.
Yeah, not just
Australia is so high in biodiversity, and there's so many endemic species that are so important. It killed so many of them.
Yeah, and high percentages, of what we know, and of course we noticed larger biodiversity, but there was a lot of smaller stuff too. But yeah, what you would think as well. I wonder if painted dead lawns still absorb as much CO2 as live lawns. I don't know. Yep. Yeah, koalas are now functionally extinct. Yep. So obviously. We have, and to think about this is another thing that I've been thinking about over the last couple of months, just the ability to fight the climate change with water, right? Like what's our relationship with water? Well, our state's gone right now if we can't produce enough of it in the right places. Like, so I think there's so many chapters in this book that to me are important. And then there's this one, which just really does for me seems much more important. All right, let me click over here. Sorry, just want to do a screen share, and I was checking out something. So we don't have anything. Make sure that you're on the food waste paper. And let me get over here to, sorry, it's just gonna take a second. And we'll get to some of these questions. I opened up the Top Hat questions, so you should have access to the Top Hat questions now. Here we are. All right. And get back to this so I could do a screen share. Yep. I mean, it's just getting worse out there for sure as I look like just during the course of this hour. It's crazy. All right. Sorry, it's taking an extra second.
I have a quick question about the paper.
Sure.
So should we for the food waste paper, should we combine the two parts? Because I know it's 2 pages of research and then 2 pages of solution. Should we write them they're separate papers, or one cohesive?
I think connecting the two of them is a good idea.
Okay.
And I'm fine with that. You know, one is just more heavy on the other piece, looking at research, and the other is a little more heavy on the solution. But I think they should bleed together. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, you're welcome for sure. All right, let's get this going on. And okay. All right. So water, there's no substitute. We've got this. And I'll actually, when I'm done with this today, I won't be finished with the whole PowerPoint necessarily. But we will, I will post the whole PowerPoint in our modules. Okay, so you can at least look at this, then you'll be able to see it ahead of time. So we're gonna look at a few questions here. Where does most of the water you drink come from? And then I'll stop screen sharing and I'll head back to the other thing. How concerned are you about the quantity, right? So obviously, you know, where are you getting your water? What is the quantity? Do you have enough water? And what's the quality of the water that you have access to? So let's look over here. Look at Top Hat again. So where does most of the water you drink come from? Tap or drinking fountain water, 31. Tap filtered, so that's not, you know, just what anywhere. And a question right now, I guess, and maybe this is a silly question, but I haven't been up to campus for a while. So on campus, so the drinking fountains, are they closed down? No, they're still open? Okay. I've noticed in several places that I've been that sometimes they've been taping them off or closing them up or something like that to the public, I guess, you know, health concerns and stuff. So most people here, not bottle filled at the store, not pre-bottled. One person said doesn't matter. So mostly, you know, we're getting it basically right out of the tap, okay? As far as the highest percentage, and then 22 people are at least, you know, making sure that it's filtered. And now I wonder if, because of our infrastructure, if most new refrigerators that have water things on them, those are all probably filtered. Whether people actually bother to change the filters, that's like a whole nother story. But yeah, so, you know, again, more infrastructure. And of course, I mean, that just wasn't around 20 years ago. You know, or it was just coming around 20 years ago. Now we're like, oh, of course there's going to be a filter on it. And of course, every, you know, refrigerator would even be able to dispense water. But again, access, we usually are experiencing having plenty here. How concerned are you about the quantity? Only 3 people were very concerned, and 35 people not at all. Ooh, this is what I like. Like if we agree a whole lot, like that's nice. But usually to me, it's interesting we come up with something like this. So why would 3 of you, and I don't know if those 3 people are here even today, because we have a class of 150 and there's 48 of us, but why very or why not at all concerned about quantity? Oh, here's a quantity piece, Preston. My parents drink 4 35-pack bottles of water a week for like the past 10 years. It disturbs me to think about it, simply because they think it tastes better. Wow, that is a lot of water. bottles. That's a lot. So what do you think? Why not at all concerned, or why very concerned? Or what did you answer and why? There's a few people that answered in the middle too as well. 17 people, sort of.
So I said sort of because my whole entire childhood I lived in a place that I was able to have complete access to water, and it wasn't like horrible tasting water or unclean water. So I said sort of because I'm also concerned about like other places that don't have good access. Like I'm aware that I have a huge benefit of having clean and safe water to drink. So that's why I said sort of.
Great. And we talk all semester long about infrastructure. I mean, we just keep saying that word. And you see how much it adds, not only to your life expectancy, but to the quality of life, right? Just to not have something that is so essential be so hard to acquire. So infrastructure, water treatment and purification plants, wastewater treatment plants, things like that. Good. Anybody else? Why they answered with quantity?
I just wanted to say that I grew up in Vegas, and in Vegas, our water is not very good. And so my family, now we're very good about using straight out of the tap and not buying plastic water bottles or anything like that. But in Vegas, we were really reliant on that because we couldn't just go to the tap and get water. That wasn't something you did there.
Right.
So we, environmentally wise, we were being not very environmentally friendly, but in the same thing, we weren't treating our water correctly, so we couldn't also rely on that resource.
And does Vegas get its water from California? I mean, that far? Or are they getting it from...
Honestly, I have no idea.
Because a lot of,
be surprised.
And there's another piece to the water rights. We could talk about water rights in my backyard. We could talk about why Lake Loveland goes down right at the end of the summer when the farmers call in their water rights, what that means. Same is true with Horsetooth Reservoir. But then when we're talking about states selling states or giving water and pumping it actually out of a state that would be, in the midst of a massive drought. That's the thing about the importance about water is we simply do not know how much we have. Freshwater aquifers and things like that. So it's not something that we can get, it's not secure because we don't have a way to purify, salt water yet to get a real secure piece for it. So right now, moving it around, big business. Vegas gets it, from Colorado River, from us, right? Yep. So interesting, very interesting. Good. All right. Write a word or two that come to mind when I say water. I don't know. Let's look at this list. Life, 5 people. Chemicals, 2 people. Essential, hydration, healthy, life source, finite, global shortage, important, refreshing, healthy, scarce, wet, overused, taken for granted, happiness, necessity, critical, rivers and cold, natural, delicious, ocean, thirsty, drinking, origin of life, running out, finite, necessity, ocean, purified, hydrating, vital, accessible, special, hose. There's the winner right there, hose. That was the tap when I was a kid, because parents didn't want you going in and out of their house a million times. So they're like, if you're thirsty, get a drink from the hose. I think we drank a lot of water from lead-based hoses when I was a kid. And one of the reasons that I know that is because actually, if you go to the store, and the last time I went about a year ago, I had to work hard to find the one hose brand that said lead-free. Right. So as I'm watering my garden, and I've been doing this for years, and you think to yourself, I wanted the cleanest water that I could for my plants. And so I said to the person working at this place, I said, there's literally 10 different hose brands here. And this is it says lead-free, but are they all have lead in them? And he was like, yeah. It's been a common component in hoses to keep their shape and other things for a long time. And I was like, what? And there's only one. And hoses transmit drinking water and water, not just to you, but of course to your plants and things like that. So I guess when I ask what our relationship with water, I think oblivious, would be something that sometimes comes to my mind. And when I know that strikes true with my dad too, because we'd be fishing on our fishing trips that we've done in the Fox River, which is about an hour north of Madison, and I'd see these there would be some big fields next to the river, and the big thing would come in with the arms that would fold to spray the field with pesticides. And I'd be like, we got to get out of here. And my dad would be like, why? And I'd be like, because otherwise we'll be breathing it in. And I think a lot of times if that makes it into our water, if we have it on our clothes or our tools or our phones or whatever, chemical, whatever, we don't think about that very often. So I see that with so many things. But yeah, hoses definitely important as far as like, I would think that it would be a requirement to have all of them in the year 2020 be lead free. I mean, it's not like people are making beaver pelt hats with mercury anymore. And although they tried to revive asbestos about a year or two ago, for real, there was a push to revive the asbestos industry. We also don't do that any longer. So yeah, I would hope that lead in drinking hoses is a thing that is not a thing. Okay, let me do a screen share here again in just a second, and we'll go a few more minutes. And put that up. All right, so do you feel bottled water safe for drink? We already looked at that, but let's look at some fast facts. It's a gorgeous cow. And oh, congratulations, she's a bride. Fast facts. Like, I don't even, it's funny. This does relate to something in my lecture, but where do you find the fact that you could just go to some place called the internet and find a picture like that is, you know, pretty magical. All right, so water cycle does not favor the continents equally. So this is what we have to know. Like, we can't just manipulate the world's water or use our clout necessarily to get that water, because it doesn't get distributed evenly, right? Water cycle does not favor everybody equally. So 6 countries account for 1/2 of the world's renewable fresh water. This is another reason why the rainforests are not just breathing, right, the lungs of the earth, but they are also the heartbeat, because you need them there to be able to gather that water. So Brazil, Canada, China, Colombia, Indonesia, and Russia. So please notice that we are not on that list, okay? 70% of all fresh water used by humans goes to agriculture. Again, I think that that's a huge consideration for us here, is we know just, you know, I think it's 1,000 liters, whatever that might be, for a pound of beef or meat, which is a highly, highly intensive water piece. So it's not just methane from cows and from animals and things like that. A big, big concern is, look at this right here. I mean, 70%. And of course, 22% industry, 8 municipalities. Some of that agriculture is growing food. A lot of it is used for animals. Wow, I can't believe how outside my window right now is changing every minute. It's really bizarre. All right, so per capita freshwaters, if that's going to drop below 100 cubic meters, then that's going to place countries in severe water stress. And so really, I have here in a nice way, or hopeful maybe, but many countries will face shortages. Obviously, our country and many countries are facing shortages. And the importance is not only that the water that they have there is below, or when it gets its drastic below 100 cubic meters, it's also when that might not even be drinkable water, right? Because we have to look at how much fresh water there is, and what a large portion of that is unsuitable for drinking. It's a very small number, right? Less than 1%, I believe. So renewable water resources per capita for select countries. You know, where are you going to be at? And this is obviously just projection 2005, which we already know, and certainly 2030, which now we're creeping up on. And I guess the important part of this is, and in some places, just how drastically that number is lowering, but that number is getting lower and lower and lower and lower. So finding ways to protect renewable water resources is, of course, of utmost importance, but I don't think that it's finding its way into global importance in the way that it needs to, considering just how fast that's disappearing, because now we're only 10 years off of this, right? So again, some pretty dramatic drop-offs in places dependent upon our climate. Little water footprint here. So good test question. What's our water footprint, right? Indicator of fresh water use. That looks at both direct and indirect water use of a consumer or a producer. There's a lot of water that goes into not just drinking, but the making of products and things like that. So we look at a domestic water footprint here. Look at our population, the water footprint, total billion cubic meters per year, and then water footprint per capita. Obviously, if we look at this list, places, China has very, 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 very high population, right? So what does it look like? And of course, we use a lot of water, and certainly more than other countries do. So I think an important indicator is population and water, right? Those things are importantly linked. And then of course, because we understand that you could have a great population or a very high population, but not be favored by the water cycle to get a lot of that water, then that gives you an indicator of places that are going to be even more under water stress. All right. So again, another good term, virtual water, that I know will likely be on the exam. I don't know, when I look through these, I just think to myself, here's a few of them that are for sure, but refers to the water used during the making, growing, making, or manufacturing of a given commodity. So here we get not just to our domestic water footprint as a nation, but the virtual water of something. So go ahead, I think, and take a look at this and then make a sociological observation. What do you think? And I'm not looking at the chat thing right now, so unmute your mic, but go ahead and look at virtual water content. We've started with a sheet of paper and all the way up to a pair of shoes. And there's an example of a gorgeous pair of shoes. I guess I've got a cow theme going on over these past few slides. I really want to get a cow for out here on the farms, because in prairie days, you needed the animal not to eat, but for milk and to make butter, so many things. So maybe we'll get a cow. Julie grew up on a dairy farm for a little while. So she used to actually show cows and then, give them or whatever, sell them at 4-H and do that whole thing. But make some sociological observations, please, about virtual water content to make different products.
One thing that I noticed is that 3 of the things that require the most water, it's milk, a hamburger, and shoes that have leather in it. So cow products use a lot of water, and especially thinking about then the US, where we have a lot of cow and dairy farms,
Right.
we're probably using a lot of water, and then also cows use up a lot of other resources too. So
Yeah. I don't know if anybody's ever connected those 3 before. I have for sure, but in a class it stands out to me that, yeah, so I guess we do have a cow theme going on here, right? Through this list. And let's say, so a glass of milk, 200 liters. Wow. A hamburger, there you go, 2,400 liters of water for one hamburger. So now think of this, right? 8,000 for a pair of shoes. Now, one of the things that I find interesting about sociology would also be fads and fashions. So, I'm not sure if this is a fashion still, but do you remember a few years back when it was very fashionable for women's shoes to be these above the knee high Lord of the Rings adventuring boots? do you know what I'm talking about? Legolas would wear a pair of those as well. I don't know, that's an obscure reference, but yeah, so if a pair of shoes is 8,000 virtual water content, 8,000 liters, think of how much something like that would be. That's a 24,000 liter pair of shoes. Now, you won't take any other classes probably where you'll be thinking about it from that point of view, but yeah, good. Any other 250 milliliter glass of beer? Any other thoughts about this list?
Something that I noticed is that the paper is actually quite high, because if it's 10 liters for just a single sheet of paper, that tends to come in reams of 500.
Right.
So
Right.
Like that's massive.
Yeah, good point. That is totally massive. Or 1,000 sheets are common, right? So yeah. And I think that, you know, we have known this for a long time, but as my partner works at a grocery store and people start talking about more toilet paper shortages and on the horizon and things like that, I wonder to myself, can we finally fully get into hemp? You know, can we finally fully take a plant that uses water well and replace paper like this, standard sheets of paper, replace toilet paper and things like that, because it just doesn't seem, again, for something you can get, and that used to be a long ways off. Hemp is now a big deal in Colorado and in some places, but still on the federal level, they've got to figure that out as well. And that would be another place that we could save water for sure. Good. Anybody else? All right.
I just have a quick thought on the like hemp paper products. Those do exist, right?
Yes,
like,
they do.
I've seen like advertisements for like hemp paper products in terms of like paper towels and things like that. But I get like what I would guess is the issue with that would be like commercializing those to the same level that we have other paper products.
Oh, absolutely. And the hemp industry right now, I know a lot. There's so many people in Colorado, that good friends of mine that are like deep into it, you know, that travel to different places and lecture at different events, just the hemp industry. But it's one of those industry that's seeing a ton of growth for sure. And yeah, it has to get there, but it has to get there probably on a federal level too, so that you can grow the volume that you would need for something like that for sure. Yeah, good thought. All right. This gives you another idea here. Just another, this is with gallons. I don't know. My son is a mathematician and he has no use for our system here. He's like, so it doesn't make a lot of sense. Here's a good embedded video that you should check out, because I don't know. This talks about how much, you know, it's a good little video that talks about how much coffee or water it takes to make a cup of coffee. And once you start telling me that I'm not going to be able to have coffee, I'm going to start to get grumpy about water conservation. But that's another human being piece, right? Like, do we need to wrap everything in paper cups and then with a paper handle and with plastic? And so by the time you look at a cup of coffee, what's really gone into that as far as virtual water? There's a video that you can watch on that's only a few minutes. Well, it might even be just a minute long. And we'll talk about this and then we'll drop off for today. Climate change here is drastically altering our water cycle. Okay, so not just whether we have access to fresh water. Access is a whole different thing, but the water cycle we talked about that is already doing its thing is changing as well. So obviously, as mean atmospheric temps rise, it's just the holding capacity of the air increases exponentially. I mean, that's why we're seeing these massively intensified weather events, just more and more and more saturated with moisture. And of course, that is coinciding with temperatures. And you don't need to raise things, like if we're concerned about water, what might be in the water, you raise things half a degree, and suddenly you've got all new microorganisms that are able to live and breed, and also the energy to drive storms as well. So floods, more water falling at higher rates, and then of course causing erosion and all sorts of increased disasters. I won't say natural disasters because we know we have a role in that. And then of course droughts elsewhere, much higher temperatures, and drying out of water sources. It's really interesting to look at the Black Sea and some other bodies of water that have been around for a long time, and look at just how those have changed over the last 100 years. Also, you know, really interesting piece. So let me stop share, come back here. Levi's started making their jeans out of hemp. Yeah, right on. I did hear that. Well, hemp is a massive frontier that will take off and will soon have the millions and millions and millions of acres needed to grow to make an impact on not having to cut down so many trees for sure. All right, so water, there's the first little bit. I will do the next part of that lecture on Tuesday. We've got plenty of time between now and then, so be working on your papers. kick back and relax and watch that Blue Gold. I mean, I'm asking you to watch a serious documentary on water, but still, you should be able to kick back and relax a bit. And once you watch it, make sure you make a post. And then anytime after you've seen that main video, you can go on and then respond to somebody's post, reply to somebody. Let me check out here. And I was just looking at the main page, and it didn't look like there's that many people that have posted yet. So jump on board, watch that, and just keep plugging away at that paper. I know that we just started talking about it. I haven't pushed back the date on it yet because I just don't want us to deceive ourselves. If I give you a few extra days and I decide that next week, fine. But more importantly, just keep working towards that goal. I think November 2nd is that goal. And then it keeps you working instead of just maybe putting it off for a few more days, potentially. Not that you would do that. I would have done that, but not you. All right. Any questions from anybody? Of course, I have my peace lily there, so I'm lecturing slightly in front of a peace lily. And my son told me that that's an awkwardly long name for a show, so he said it's perfect instead of between two ferns. He gave me the green light on that. So when this YouTube channel gets huge because so many people want to learn about sociology and I don't know. Anyway, let's hope that happens. Any other questions, anybody? I'll be quiet for a sec here. Just want to make sure I address any concerns that anybody has.
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Drew.
Go ahead.
No, you can go.
How many more is this like the last paper, like the last essay or discussion that we do, or do we have any more after this?
Yeah, I'm going to release a bunch of those. Not a bunch. I think we have one more maybe content or solution papers. That's a small one, a page one. And I know that we'll have other discussions. And there's at least 4 discussions for the course of the semester, but I'll try and post those ahead of time. I've been happy to, if I release everything ahead of time and I'm not sure of our pacing, sometimes things don't coincide. So I've liked the way that things have been coinciding with what we're doing. But yeah, there's going to be at least 1 or 2 more discussions. So 80 to 100 points in discussions that you'll be able to, and that should be on the syllabus, but that you'll be able to really, I get those points fairly easily as compared to other things. This paper, though, is the biggest paper and the only one paper of this size that we'll have. So that's why it's 150 points. The other ones have been worth, much less. That being said, there is a writing center where lonely English majors sit in a basement. Well, they probably don't anymore. They used to, though. Now they probably sit in their rooms and Zoom people. But there are people on campus that are getting paid to help write papers. It's awesome. If you've not experienced that, if you've just been trying to do this all on your own, why? Like what's your major? If it's not English and you want somebody to read it over or help you with it, they will do that. If you need help with citations, they're there. Now, of course, Elijah and Lawrence are there for you. I'm there for you. So if you start writing this paper, bounce it off of somebody at the writing center. Send us a page or a paragraph or one of your GTAs who's been grading your work. You know who's dealing with that alphabetically. Send them an email and reach out. Because one thing I don't want is for people to stress out about anything in this class. And even though this is a bigger paper on food waste, yeah, once you write some of it, if you feel like you need to share it to see if you're on the right track, I'm always about that, And also, if anybody needs to meet, I'm back. I mean, I wasn't gone really, and I can't stop working because I just have so many classes and I'm so busy and I got the farm and I got the boys in my life. And so I'm here though. So I have been meeting with people through Zoom to answer individual questions that they have and stuff like that. I even see somebody who I met with today. I think, was that earlier today or was that yesterday, Ryan? Maybe that was yesterday. Anyway, so if you have any questions, just let me know. Schedule an appointment, email me, register to vote. October 26th is the deadline, and already we are seeing record numbers of people voting, which I think is absolutely what our democracy needs, or otherwise it's not a democracy, right? So participate, and be good people and do good things. Any questions? I don't want to.
Well, I just have one more about, I know you mentioned writing subheadings. That was in the thing about the paper. I don't know how we should
I like to avoid creative spacing, and too many subheadings might lead to creative spacing. You know, but as people are trying to organize themselves, I also think that maybe it's a good way to help you organize yourself. So I really just I have a bunch of generic things at the end of, you know, the paper that I think anybody writing a paper should consider. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, I would avoid, if you do subheadings, you know, you do not need spaces between each individual paragraph. Sometimes people do that, or a font, and they do 12 because they're used to it instead of 11 like I require. Just make sure it's all in the right font, that all that technical stuff is there. It sounds lame, but if I have a font 12 paper, I'm just going to shrink it down to the correct font and then grade it. And I know that people, for the most part, do not do that intentionally. You know, and remember that it's single space, things like that. But yeah, yep, subheadings just to help organize your thoughts, and maybe the paper, but maybe that it doesn't. Maybe it's not. Wouldn't require really a whole bunch of subheadings. I wouldn't think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? All right. Cha cha cha. See you next time, everybody. Peace. Be good people. Do good things. Take care.